today's get together is deep underground military bases. And within this presentation, I'm going to give you the locations of where you can find these deep underground military bases. I'm going to give you the potential reasons why the United States government has built these. And I'm also going to give you some information on the funding, the tremendous amount of billions and trillions of dollars that have been poured into these programs that have no congressional oversight and no public scrutiny. So please stay with me today. So I want to give you the references where I'm getting this information so that you have breadcrumbs to follow and you can verify what I'm saying here. Now, one gentleman that deserves credit for all this, and I don't think he's got enough credit at this point, is this gentleman, Richard Sauder. He's done a fantastic job compiling this information together, drawings, documents, government facilities. He's dug into archives in libraries and he's pulled out proceedings papers. I don't think anyone has dug as deep as Richard Sauder. So this was his first book that started all this. It was a revolution, underground bases and tunnels. What is the government trying to hide? And then below, as a subtitle, it says there are more underground bases than you think. And there's more going on than just planning to keep the president alive in a nuclear war. Working from public documents and corporate records, this book digs below the surface of the government's super secret underground. I love it. It's great. I highly recommend this book. Now, he also wrote a follow-up book, Hidden in Plain Sight Beyond the X-Files. And he also talks about undersea bases as well. So this is the reference material of where I got the information for this presentation. So I want to get the terminologies pinned down here. When we talk about DUMBs, we're talking about deep underground military bases. That is the acronym. And the thinking behind this, according to the government, I'm going to move on to the next slide here, is their motto, out of sight, out of mind. So if you're not seeing it, it doesn't exist. That's according to the government. So anything of any value is never on the surface. It's always underground. So if you've got a super secret classified aircraft, they're going to put it in an underground facility. If you've got a program that bypasses congressional oversight, they don't want you to know about it, they're going to put it underground. So it's out of sight, out of mind. Now, how deep do these underground bases go? That's really a good question here. Well, according to Richard Sauder, we could be up to 3 miles deep and up to even beyond that, up to 14 miles depth. It's unbelievable what's been going on here. And we have no idea. We can't even think about what's the logistics involved in manufacturing, designing, and building such a facility at 14 miles depth is nothing but staggering. Now, I want to talk about a very interesting quote by Richard Sauder, and he sums it up very well here. He says, quote,
"We are certainly dealing at the least with trillions of dollars of off-the-books money, very advanced technology, an incredible infrastructure of secrecy. Thousands and thousands of people are in the know, but say little or nothing about what they know, all of which revolves around projects of tremendous scope and complexity, carried out over a long period of time, and about which there is almost zero public knowledge."
He's absolutely correct, because we're just going through our daily lives. We're paying our bills and we're commuting to work. We have no idea what is lurking beneath our feet here. Let's continue on. Now, I want to introduce everyone to the RAND Corporation. They play a major role in this. And I want to move on to the newspaper clipping so I can give you some backup, some firepower here, so we have something to pin this down on. This is Memphis Press Scimitar, November 4th, 1948. So the main heading here is Air Force Acquiring Laboratory Full of Civilian Scientists. Subheading, New Project Out West. Free reign given the experts. So like they have a total free reign here. Zooming into their article, I'm going to start the lower left. The Air Force announced today that an independent nonprofit research organization known as the RAND Corporation has been established at Santa Monica, California. Its name is a contraction of Research and Development. Its object is to conduct a new type of scientific research and analysis. They go on. There has been a Project RAND since 1946. It was set up by the Air Force and the Douglas Aircraft Company as an experiment. At that time, the Air Force said it had possible eventual independence in mind. Later, top executives of the Boeing Aircraft Company, Northrop Aircraft Incorporated, and North American Aviation Incorporated came in as co-partners. The compelling idea behind Project RAND, the Air Force said, was the necessity for conducting scientific work in a civilian framework as a result of World War II experience. So you've got this whole group of aerospace defense contractors coming together as a united coalition, as a massive think tank to do these out-of-the-box projects and thinking over the horizon. That was their mandate for the RAND Corporation. That takes us to this document right here. Project RAND, Proceedings of the Second Protective Construction Symposium, Deep Underground Construction. So this is March 24th, March 25th, March 26th of 1959. So this is their documents, not my document. This is actually their document. And I'm going to take you inside here and explain what's been going on since at least 1959. I want to take you inside page 645, where they give you a really nice synopsis of what this is actually all about here. And this is what they say. Just as airplanes, ships, and automobiles have given man mastery of the surface of the earth, tunnel boring machines and shaft sinkers will give him access to the subterranean world. It is our aim to provide machines which will supply the ever-increasing demand in mining and construction of underground facilities. We expect to play a major part in mechanizing the excavating industry. So within this little paragraph here, they're talking about tunnel boring machines and shaft sinkers and underground facilities. This is in their own government document, so we can track what they're doing here. Now, further on into this document, they had this interesting graphic here. So this is Zenny shaft sinking machine model X153. I'm not going to go through all the callouts here, but as you can see, what they're doing is first they drill these vertical shafts. So they sink these vertical shafts. And then a little bit off to the left or right, they do another vertical shaft and they remove all the center material. Then they start going out sideways and making these different layers and levels to the underground facilities. I'm going to move on to the next slide here. And I did a little bit of a colorized version. And you can see the men working here. You've got the cutters and you've got the sections on the bottom here. Just to give you more of a pictorial, I'm going to move on to the next slide, and this kind of blows things up. I'm going to start at the bottom section and work my way up. So you've got the cutters, you've got the cutter mounting ring, you've got compressed air pipes, the cutting pickup pipes, ring gear and thrust bearing, vacuum pickup and rotary motors, aligning jacks, operations platform, thrust jack. So they've got all this laid out. And this is something that we want to consider so that we have an idea of exactly how they actually build these. Okay, what I want to do now is I want to take you to one of these actual real world shaft sinking devices. And I found this very interesting newspaper clipping. Had to dig deep to get it. And this is from Beckley Post Herald, June 29th, 1959. And it says here, tunnels through solid rock. This untested machine designed to tunnel through solid rock will be displayed Monday at the C.H. Mead Coal Company mine near Princewich. So this required some serious cleaning up work, but this gives you an idea of what these shaft sinkers actually looks like here. Let's move on. Now, to back this up, this is Florida Today, December 17th, 1984. The same company, the Zenny Drilling Company, later on had this interesting classified ad that I found here, and I'm just going to read the top part. It says, a Morgantown, West Virginia firm is expanding operations in southern Florida. Zenny Drilling Company is a leader in large diameter shaft sinking exploration and construction. Zenny needs entry-level people who enjoy physical activity and are intelligent and have a strong desire to get ahead. So this is just basically proving that this company does exist. They talk about what they're doing here. They talk about large diameter shaft sinking exploration and construction. So it's checking all of the boxes to our discussion today. That brings us to this gentleman, which I thought was very interesting. This is talked about in Richard's book here, and I'm going to read this quote. It says, quote, "After World War II, political and economic factors changed the underground construction picture and caused a renewed interest to think underground. As a result of this interest, the Corps of Engineers became involved in the design and construction of some very complex and interesting military projects." Now, this is a quote from Lloyd Dusha, Deputy Director for Engineering and Construction for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, in a 1987 engineering lecture. But look what he says here. Some very complex and interesting military projects. What is he talking about? What is he referring to? What does this guy actually know here? He goes on, quote, "Although the conference program indicates the topic to be underground facilities for defense experience and lessons, I must deviate a little because several of the most interesting facilities that have been designed in construction by the Corps are classified." So not only do we have interesting programs and interesting underground facilities, but according to this gentleman, some of these are classified and he can't even talk about it. What does this guy know that we don't know? The Tennessean, October 4th, 1984, "How to Build Underground Missile-Based Studies." So this is at the midpoint of the Reagan buildup here. You've got ICBMs, you've got nuclear silos. We had the quote-unquote Soviet threat bearing down on us. And so that was why this Reagan buildup, with complete black budget on some of these and an open check, where you could almost do anything back at that time. I'm just going to highlight a couple of important points here. Defense officials said that in a top secret report to Defense Secretary Caspar Weinberger in July, the Air Force said that basing missiles deep underground was feasible, both militarily and technically. The plan has been under study for 2 years, they said. So let's continue on. The mining industry has successfully sunk shafts and conducted operations at even greater depths than those contemplated here. Single tunnels up to 50 miles long have been built. Many underground cavities larger than those contemplated have been constructed. Whoa, wait a minute. Let's back up. Hold up. What's going on here? So they're already talking about things that are even deeper in depth than the ICBM nuclear missile silos. It's already a done deal. They're telling us in here in this newspaper clipping, up to 50 miles long have already been built and more sophisticated than ones for the ICBMs. I find that very interesting. I find that staggering. Next, I want to take you to a real world whistleblower. Now, I know he was a whistleblower because he did not receive authorization from the Pentagon to talk about this, but I did interview him about 20 years ago, and he told me that he was in charge of a program to tow a B-52 through an underground tunnel that connected Air Force Plant 42 to Edwards North Base Complex. And you can see my illustration here that gives you an idea of what this looks like. So if we could take ground penetrating radar 2 miles from Air Force Plant 42 in the direction of Edwards North Base Complex, it should be there. It should show up on ground penetrating radar. Now, if I move on to the next slide, what I did is I put together kind of an illustration that gives you an idea of what this might have looked like. Now, he also said that sitting on the upper spine of the B-52 was an X-20 dinosaur-looking space plane. As he's moving this B-52 through this underground tunnel, he also said that there were connecting shafts that were twice as big as the shaft that he was in. And you could put two B-52s side by side and still have 6 feet on either wingtip. This is my attempt of illustrating that. It didn't go quite according to plan because you can't always get AI to behave, but this starts to give you the idea of just how large these shafts can be. Now, I want everyone to take a good look at this slide that I have here. And what does the German Autobahn have to do with underground bases? Is there something that we can learn from this? Was this a template or a blueprint for something else? That's what we want to explore here. I'm going to move on to the next slide here. And this is directly from Richard's book. The Todd organization was a civil and military engineering organization in Nazi Germany from 1933 to 1945, named for its founder, Fritz Todd, an engineer and senior member of the Nazi Party. The organization was responsible for a huge range of engineering projects, both in Nazi Germany and in occupied territories from France to the Soviet Union during the Second World War. Now, I don't want to get into an in-depth discussion about the Nazi Party here, but we have to maintain historical accuracy here. It's very clear as we go on that it's these engineering projects and underground facilities that were built, designed, and constructed by the Nazis that was used as a design blueprint for the underground bases here in America. Let's continue on here with the next slide. Vast underground facilities built by the Todd organization and discovered after World War II became the blueprint/template for vast underground projects designed and built by the American Army Corps of Engineers. What did U.S. technical intelligence teams really find? So here you've got the underground facilities, the V-2 rockets, the V-1 buzz bombs, and when the American technical intelligence groups went in here, they were astounded by the vast size of this. Now, it's terrible and atrocious that a lot of this was done by slave labor, and we're not going to let that go. But we have to remain historically accurate here because this was the blueprint, the foundation for American black programs and deep underground military bases. That brings us to this slide here. I want to give an idea of where we're talking about here. Where are these located? And I've got a list. I'm going to rip through this kind of quickly here. Number 1, Maryland, Camp David. Fort Meade, Maryland. FEMA, Alternate Underground Command Center, Olney, Maryland. Site R, Raven Rock, 6 miles northeast of Camp David. Number 5, Mount Weather, Bluemont, Virginia. 6, the Pentagon, Virginia. U.S. Army Warrenton Training Stations, A and B, Warrenton, Virginia. The White House, Washington, D.C. Number 9, Medina Annex, Lackland Air Force Base, San Antonio, Texas. Number 10, Camp Bullis, San Antonio. 11, Fort Hood, Killeen, Texas. Yeah, they've got an underground facility at Fort Hood. Stringfield talks about it. 12, Offutt Air Force Base, Nebraska. We'll talk about that. 13, Kirtland Air Force Base, New Mexico. What was going on at the Manzano Nuclear Storage Facility at Kirtland? Yeah, we know about it. 14, Los Alamos, New Mexico. Absolutely sprawling facility there. 15, White Sands Missile Range. Cheyenne Mountain, Colorado Springs. We all know about that. The Denver Federal Center, Colorado. Naval Support Activity, Mid-South, Millington, Tennessee. That's number 18. Number 19, China Lake, California. And number 20, Edwards North Base Complex, California. That's where the secret aircraft originate from and have test flights all around the Antelope Valley. The first underground facility that we're going to be discussing today is Camp David, which I'm sure you've heard about in the mainstream news. It was talked about multiple times during the Reagan administration. And I want to move on to a very important slide by our good friend Richard Sauter here. And he says, quote, "My source informed me that the underground portions of Camp David are so extensive and elaborate, and there are so many miles of secret tunnels that it is doubtful that any one person would have a complete map of the facility in his or her mind. So if you think about the implications of what that means and how intricate and involved and detailed this facility is, it's got to be staggering. Now, let's move on to the Reagan administration and the Reagan buildup, 81 to 86 timeframe. And I put this slide together just to give you an idea of what this hypothetical situation might be. If we had a national emergency, the president would be whisked away to Camp David at the underground facility, and he would be addressing the nation something like, "My fellow Americans, it has come to my attention that there exists a potential threat, and we're taking these precautions at this time." Well, that never happened, and we hope it doesn't, but it would have been done through either the White House bunker or Camp David. Let's continue on here. Now, another underground facility, which is very vast, very involved, is NSA headquarters at Fort Meade, Maryland. And when I found out what was going on here from Richard Sauter, got to give him credit. It's unbelievable what's going on here. So let me clue you in here. And this is another good quote. He says, "My research from a variety of sources indicates that there is a huge underground maze beneath Fort Meade. Fort Meade is operated by the U.S. Army, but the National Security Agency, NSA, has its largest publicly known operations center there. The NSA has literally acres upon acres of supercomputers underground at Fort Meade, stacked level upon level, going down and down and down like a gargantuan subterranean stack of high-tech digital pancakes. The NSA is notorious for the echelon spying program and other unconstitutional spying activities." This gentleman has worded this correctly here. So let's break it down. So he talks about NSA headquarters at Fort Meade, Maryland. Then he talks about acres upon acres of supercomputers that are underground, that are stacked like digital pancakes, which is a great description of it. And they're also monitoring every phone call, every text, every voicemail, everything. They're literally tracking everything we do that leaves a digital footprint. So how are we going to visualize this? How are we going to put this in some type of a pictorial description where we can actually get a mind's eye on what he's talking about here? So I put this illustration together here that shows you these stacks of supercomputers. The computing power at this subterranean computer farm has got to be second to none. They've got the most powerful computer system here, probably in the world, no doubt about it. It's anyone's guess just what's going on. But if you extrapolate this information, if you think about what AI is doing now, and you talk about quantum computing and the quote-unquote digital farms they're putting together, this is all being done under the Trump administration now, putting all this money into these digital farms and things. What are they really trying to do with this? It's got to be more than just monitoring terrorists. There's something else going on here. Let's move on a little bit. What secrets is the NSA keeping from the world? And do they have the master UFO file? Leonard Stringfield talks about this. This is one location. And one of Stringfield's witnesses said that if you can get a copy of the master UFO file from NSA headquarters, boom, you've got it. So you know that what they've done is they've operated under a no single point failure policy. There's no way they're going to risk having all this information in one place. They are going to diversify their portfolio, and they'll have some things at CIA, they'll have some things at NSA headquarters, another location over here. That's exactly what they've done here. Let's move on. Baltimore Sun, August 4th, 1989 newspaper clipping. NSA to seek 3,000 acres for growth at Fort Meade. So this is just telling you that they're ramping up. They're getting ready to build this additional space for the underground facility. And then let's move on here. This is the same article. Quote, she said the NSA has no immediate plans to build on the land, but needs more room for expansion as it becomes increasingly dependent on computers and processing systems, both of which require considerable space to house and operate. So this is the beginning of their modification program, where they're ramping up to build even more of these underground facilities to store the supercomputers. Now, I want to take you to a little bit more information on this underground facility, specifically the NSA facility. And I want to take you to this book by James Bamford called The Puzzle Palace: Inside the National Security Agency, America's Most Secret Intelligence Organization. This gentleman did a fantastic job digging into this and bringing out some really good details. And I want to hit you with this quote here. It says, the NSA's enormous basement, which stretches for city blocks beneath the headquarters operations building, undoubtedly holds the largest and most advanced computer operation in the world. James Bamford. So that confirms it. Without a doubt, they do have the largest computer bank system in the world, without any doubt. Now, next we want to talk about Raven Rock, Site R, the underground Pentagon. And we'll get some details on Raven Rock here. And I want to take you to a June 13th, 2006 article that was published in the Times Gazette. And they have kind of a heading here, Continuity of Government Exercise. So when we talk about continuity of government, we're talking about during a national emergency, the president, the vice president, the speaker of the House, and all the way down the line, there's a chain of command, who's president next. And these high-level political figures are brought to these facilities to maintain our government here. But I want to talk about specifically what was going on here. So this is Times Gazette, June 13th, 2006. Congress would shelter and Raven Rock, or Site R, a national security bunker bored into granite along the Pennsylvania-Maryland border and near Camp David, where the Joint Chiefs of Staff would command a protracted nuclear war. Special communications networks were built, and evacuation and succession procedures were practiced continually. So that's the key terminology here, succession procedures. So they already have done this. They've had multiple training exercises. They know what to do in the event of a national emergency here. Okay, now the next facility we're going to talk about is Mount Weather. Let me take you to this newspaper clipping that was published in the Richmond Times-Dispatch, April 8th, 1973, and their heading here is Ins and Outs of Secret Sites Hard to Define. And we're going to blow up a certain paragraph here, and this is what it says. No one knows who thought of it first, but now most of the people on the mountain think they know what Mount Weather is. They think most of it is out of sight, underground. They think Mount Weather is a command post the president could use if Washington were attacked. Well, they're basically correct here. But let me go a little bit further. Let's go to this detailed map. Off to the right, you've got Washington, D.C. So you've got the White House there. You've got Capitol building there. Now, off to the left, along Highway 50 going westbound, you've got Mount Weather on this beautiful map. It's a short helicopter trip from Washington, D.C. to Mount Weather. So in case of a national emergency, the president could be flown to this facility. Now, this was an article published in the Roanoke Times, August 6, 1978. It says, Town's aura belies secret facility. And let's go to a zoom in on a specific part of the article here. It says, the hikers don't know it, but they are plodding past the edge of America's wartime command post, an elaborate nerve center dug into solid granite and designed to protect the president and his top advisors in case of a nuclear attack. So they're telling us right here what the design parameters are and what the overall purpose is of the facility. That takes us to the Pentagon. Lots of things going on at the Pentagon, but specifically in the Pentagon basement. Leonard Stringfield talks about things going on in the Pentagon basement, which I've covered before. Let me take you to a very interesting article that was published in the Peninsula Times-Tribune, Saturday, March 25th, 1989. This is before Dick Cheney was the vice president. It says, new defense chief gets lost in the Pentagon basement. So Dick Cheney recently passed away, and I've always wondered what secrets he took to his grave. But let me zoom in on this article and give you a real detailed view of what went on here. And this is Dick Cheney here. He says, quote, I went out and got on the elevator in the secretary's suite and went down to get in the car. And when I went down in the elevator, the doors opened and I stepped out the doors. The doors closed behind me and there was no car there. I was in the basement of the Pentagon. It was a bit disconcerting because I turned around to look for a button to push to get to the elevator. So here you've got Dick Cheney gets lost in the Pentagon basement. And I just wonder what's going on at the Pentagon basement even now. And I want to take you to a little bit of an insight of what else is going on here in the Pentagon basement. Ironton Tribune, January 9th, 1981. Psychic task force at work in guarded Pentagon basement. So this basement at the Pentagon is being used for multiple purposes here. And we'll zoom in on this article. In a closely guarded basement room, a top secret psychic task force is hard at work trying to perfect psychotronic weapons that will work through extrasensory perception, like long-distance telepathic hypnosis, to enslave enemy leaders or transmission of nuclear bombs instantaneously around the world through the power of positive thinking. Oof. I'd like to find out more about exactly how far they took this. You know, we're talking about psychotronic, we're talking about things dealing with perhaps AI integrated things. If they've continued this, I'd love to find out how far they actually took this. That brings us to this. Abilene Reporter, News, July 21st, 1986. Wars rage in Pentagon basement. It's only a game, but the strategies and targets are real. So they're war gaming. They're checking on mental telepathy. They're looking at different types of things that they can use with a united group of individuals coming together. I'm sure they're using AI. I'm sure they're using computer data farms. I'd love to know what's actually going on now. Just how deep does the secrecy go? How much history has been lost and hidden from American taxpayers? And I'm excited to show you this article right here. I dug this up. I knew there was more to the story, so I dug this up. This is the Sunday Star Bulletin and Advertiser, September 12th, 1971, long time ago. Machine Choose Secret Papers. So you can see they've got this conveyor belt and they've got these blades that chew up classified documents, and then they have a chemical additive that's brought into the mix here, and then once it's completely mixed, it comes off this conveyor belt in a pulp type condition, completely unreadable. So think about how much history has been lost to the American taxpayer here, and this is a blow up of the section within the article here. They work in a deep Pentagon basement where they watch 2 tons of old classified documents every hour pass up a conveyor belt to meet whirling blades that will chew them up into unrecognizable pulp. So the takeaway here is, when this is going on in 71, they were destroying 2 tons of classified documents every hour. Can you imagine how much history has been lost, just completely lost? So of course, I had to do some kind of visual aid so we have an idea here. So here you've got these workers at the Pentagon loading pallets of classified documents into this hopper. The blades chop this up, it gets shredded, it gets mixed with the additive, goes off the conveyor belt, loaded onto a dump truck, and gone. All this history completely gone, and we will never know what's actually going on here. Next, I want to take you to the underground facility beneath the White House. And some of you might be familiar with this. So this is the Mausoleum, February 2nd, 2002. So not quite a year after 9/11. Here it says 10 days in September. Day 1, in the first frantic hours, White House response to terrorism emerged. And then they go on here. Shortly after 9:30 p.m. on September 11th, President Bush brought together his most senior national security advisors in a hardened bunker beneath the White House grounds. It was just 13 hours after the deadliest attack on the U.S. homeland in the country's history. So here we've got Bush, we've got Cheney, we've got high-level cabinet members at this underground facility, basically at the White House, strategizing what the nation should do next here. Very, very tense times for the president and the vice president. Now, this facility is called the PEOC, Presidential Emergency Operations Center. The PEOC is a hardened fortified bunker beneath the East Wing for catastrophic emergencies. So this was one time that it was justified for the president and the vice president to be there. And so here is the illustration that I came up with that shows the vice president, Dick Cheney. We've got Bush here. He's consulting with military personnel. What should we do next? Should we formulate a response? A chaotic time for sure, but this is at the PEOC beneath the White House. Now, the next article is important here, and this was published in the Ledger, April 13th, 1989. It says, Polk firm makes White House connection. And what we're showing here in this beautiful graphic is that in the event of a national emergency where the power system and the power grid goes completely dark and goes offline, members of the cabinet of the White House, they have a way to contact the president inside an underground facility below the White House, and they're using a pneumatic tube system with no electrical power required at all. It's the same type system that you've seen at your bank. When you want to cash a check, you put your check into this little clear plastic tube, you load that into a long transparent tube, and then using compressed air pneumatics, that tube is sent up, around, goes to the teller, she cashes the check, puts the money in the tube, gets sent back to you. All this can be done without electrical power, and this is what they've done. So if they've got independent backup, redundancy. It's brilliant what they've done, and that's what this article talks about here. Let me go into a little more detail. Again, this is the Ledger, April 13th, 1989. The tube, Condolph said, will run to an underground bunker 3 stories beneath the White House and will be used as a communications link in the event of some national crisis that forces the nation's leaders underground. So they're just telling you actually what's going on here. That takes us to Fort Hood, Texas. And this is a little involved here. Done a lot of digging on this. This is something that Leonard Stringfield talks about. What's going on at Fort Hood, Texas? We want to dive into this here. Specifically, Robert Gray Army Airfield. That's what we specifically want to talk about here. And I want to go to a couple of quotes within Stringfield's publication here. Special note, the colonel stated that underground installations as well as isolated areas of military reservations have squadrons of unmarked helicopters which have sophisticated instrumentation on board that are dispatched to areas of UFO activity to monitor these craft or airlift them out of an area if one has malfunctioned, like Cash Landrum incident, December 29th, 1980, Huffman, Texas. Is that what they're referring to? This is page 100. It goes on. Quote, the technology that is being applied in this underground complex would remind someone of a science fiction thriller. It is unbelievable what they know and can do from this area. So this is referenced Tommy Blonde, page 92 in the book, statement from a Texas underground base worker. So what we've been able to determine here, and there's multiple eyewitnesses that back this up, is that at Fort Gray, at the Army airfield here, there's an underground facility. And UFOs have been seen coming out of this underground facility being escorted by military helicopters. So you've got UH-1 Bells, you've got CH-47 Chinook helicopters escorting these flying saucer craft. This has been reported multiple times here. So here is a picture of the CH-47s, what they look like. And then let me go take you to Rudy Gardea's drawing, and let me take you back to the Stringfield report. In the Stringfield report, it says that right around 1968, there was a private pilot flying a Cessna 172. He had to make an emergency landing, and he landed on an unimproved runway at Fort Hood Gray Army Airfield. Within a matter of a minute, and this is not talked about, this is happening under our feet with no congressional oversight whatsoever. We have no clue what's going on at these underground facilities. But in this case, we do have an idea. This is another view with the hangar bay door shut, and you can see this underground runway. I'm sure they can take F-15s if they need to, F-16s, certainly all the Army aircraft, helicopters, logistics here. It's an absolutely massive underground facility. There was an Army Jeep that pulled up with 2 military guards with pistols aimed directly at the pilot. He had his hands up. If you look at Rudy's drawing, you can kind of see that. Now, while all this is going on, concurrently, there was an absolutely massive bypass door that opened up. At least 300 feet by 300 feet. Absolutely massive bypass door that opened up. Now, you would never know that there was anything there because the upper section of this bypass door had vegetation on it. It had plants. It had low shrubs on it. It has a little bit of a tree there. It blends in with the surrounding area. We've heard this before as well. So you would never know anything was there. Now, I want to take you inside this facility here, and I'm going to move on to the next slide. Here you've got the military personnel holding up the private pilot with the Cessna 172. And while this is going on, here you've got this massive bay door that opens up. What this was, and this is reported within the Stringfield collection, this is an underground runway facility. They said that they can have C-130 4-engine cargo transport plane operations from here. They're obviously talking about the C-130. So something large enough to handle the logistics of takeoffs and runways with a large C-130. This is a big facility here. You've got vehicles, you've got choppers, you've got Bell UH-1 Hueys, you've got CH-47 Chinooks. This is a massive underground facility. The next facility we want to cover is Offutt Air Force Base, a very established facility. And let me take you to the newspaper clipping here. This is Lincoln Journal-Star, September 12th, 2001. Offutt, part of plan to protect president. So immediately after 9/11, they came out with this article here, and they go on. Offutt, one of the most secure military facilities in the country, has been at the center of U.S. security policy for more than 50 years, but never more so than Tuesday. During his stop in Bellevue, Bush held meetings in the base's underground command center, including a National Security Council meeting by teleconference. Kirtland Air Force Base. Another interesting thing, and I think we know what might be going on here, which is highly restricted, highly classified. Let me give you a little bit of a background here. 1968, no date given. And this is talked about within the Stringfield publication. We're talking about the Manzano Nuclear Weapons Storage Facility, Kirtland Air Force Base, New Mexico. Again, the reference is page 114 in Stringfield's publication, UFO Crash Retrievals. And the source is a career airman via Craig Wetzel. But what I think is interesting is what they determined and found out here. A little bit of a background. The Manzano Storage Area, or Manzano Base, was a top secret, heavily guarded underground nuclear weapons storage facility built in 1947. Here's that date again. inside the Manzano Mountain near Albuquerque, New Mexico, operated by the U.S. Air Force on Kirtland Air Force Base. It stored, maintained, and assembled nuclear weapons for over 20 years before being abandoned in 1992, with operations moving to a new underground facility. So, what did Stringfield's source tell him was being stored here? Well, none other than one of these recovered disc-shaped craft. What a wonderful place to hide a flying saucer that was recovered at a nuclear weapons storage facility. No one would ever think twice that something would be there, but we have at least some type of a paperwork, a documentation, a source to verify that this actually took place. We've got at least something to pin it down on. Now, Los Alamos National Laboratory, another sprawling complex. Let's go to the detail here from Richard Sauter. This is page 22. I have been informed that the underground workspace beneath Los Alamos is even greater in extent than the sprawling surface facility, reaching as much as 1 mile deep in its farthest reaches. Wow, so now we're talking about well over 5,000 feet deep and even larger in expanse than the whole area on the upper section. I think that's interesting, very historically significant. Cheyenne Mountain, NORAD headquarters. I think everyone is familiar with Cheyenne Mountain. It's been featured in multiple movies such as War Games. But let me give you a little bit of background here. And this is the Chippewa Herald Telegram, August 19th, 1961. Our air defense goes underground. This is the beginning of the facility being constructed here. They go on. The miners are part of the crew pushing 2 parallel tunnels through the granite insides of the 13,500-foot mountain, which will house the underground combat operations center of the North American Air Defense Command. Interesting. I love it. Good wording on this. They go on here. The mission of the Combat Operations Center is to detect an aerospace attack on North America, notifying all military and civil defense units and providing warning to the Strategic Air Command. It aims for quick detection to gain maximum warning time. So, in the event of a nuclear strike where you've got incoming ICBMs from any nation, it would be this NORAD facility that would have a heads up that would alert other military bases around the country, but it would be detected here at NORAD first. And here is this famous concrete reinforced blast door. And they always have a saying here, don't bother coming because the door will already be closed when you get there. So this is the Cheyenne Mountain facility, and very well documented. I think we've all heard about this, but I just wanted to give just a brief overview of this particular NORAD facility. This was an interesting article from Colorado Springs Gazette-Telegraph, December 3rd, 1971. It says here, more NORAD construction in Mountain. Santa Fe Construction Company of Lancaster, California, was awarded the contract for a $12 million project to construct another 3 buildings and new power plant in NORAD's underground complex in Cheyenne Mountain, the Department of Defense announced on Thursday. So this is just laying out the construction of this facility here. China Lake is the next one we want to talk about here. Lots of things going on at China Lake for sure here. And this is an interesting little snippet here that I put in here. This is directly from the book. And this is a meeting between the United States Naval personnel and Richard Sauter. And this is what was said here. I asked him how deep the deepest part extended. He looked at me soberly and said very quietly, it goes 1 mile deep. I then asked him what the underground base contains. He said, weapons. I responded, what sort of weaponry? And he answered without pausing, quote, weapons more powerful than nuclear weapons. So what would be more powerful than nuclear weapons? Are we talking about scalar weapons? Are we talking about directed energy weapons? That could be what this naval personnel was referring to here. Dugway Proving Ground, Utah. Lot of talk about this facility, massive facility. Now, we have someone, and it is a Dr. Greer witness, that stated that this facility has 1,300 square miles of underground sections below the surface here. It's a staggering number. 1,300 square miles. That's just absolutely massive. So what would that look like if we put that into some kind of illustration? Something that looks like this. This is a Dr. Stephen Greer witness that had talked about this. And so you've got the C-17s, you've got Air Force One, you've got the high-speed maglev train system, you've got Army personnel, you've got CH-47 Chinooks, you've got Bell UH-1s. This has got to be a nerve center for a lot of different tunnels coming in to one location. So this is Dugway Proving Ground. If you want to learn about more information, I highly recommend this book that I wrote with Dr. Greer, Disclosure and Illustrated History. And in this publication, I go into specific details on a number of subjects. Number one, historical UFO cases. Number two, UFO crash retrieval cases. Number three, Stephen Greer witnesses specifically. It's a very good book. It's fully illustrated. I highly recommend it. Are we just looking at an offshore oil drilling platform, or are we looking at something else completely different? Are we looking at a red herring, a cover-up? Specifically, are some offshore drilling platforms a cover for the entrance of an undersea base? How many of these platforms are nothing more than window dressing? And when I read this in Richard Sauter's book and really put my mind to it, I think it was staggering the implications of what he was kind of referring to here and alluding to. Which brings me to this. So here is my slide that gives you kind of an idea of what this would look like, because all of these pylons are attached to the sea floor, and you could use any one of them for the entrance to an undersea floor subbase, which is, we're talking about billions of dollars being poured into these projects. So I thought that was a real eye-opening concept. Here is another quote from Richard Sauter. We are faced with a global system that is so secretive and so wildly out of control that the vast majority of us have no earthly clue what is going on. Next part here, chapter 2, page 30 in the book, Letters from the Underground. There were at least one significant statement that I wanted to highlight. And here, this is from Richard Sauter. He says, quote, "The propagandist news on television and radio and in the newspapers and news magazines, the many false pronouncements by government, deeply entrenched journalistic and scientific censorship, and other sources of falsehood and deceit flowing from educational and religious institutions serve to foster the mass delusion that everything is in reality as it appears to be. Nothing could be further from the truth." So in other words, out of sight, out of mind. If we can't see it, then it doesn't exist. It's not happening. That's the mentality. That is what the mainstream media wants us to believe, that anything that's of any existence is just always on the surface, but that's not the case at all. The underground high-speed maglev tube shuttle system. This is another thing we want to talk about, because they've got to attach these underground bases somehow. They've got to have a link to get to them. And this is interesting here. This is secondhand contact via Bill Hamilton, researcher Bill Hamilton. Here's this friend here. It says, "What's it like to ride in one of those underground shuttles?" And here's their response here. "Very damn fast. Less than 1 hour from Cheyenne Mountain entrance to the Pentagon. My calculator would tell me that was over 2,000 miles an hour. Odd though, you don't feel the speed being totally enclosed with no windows." Now this is from Los Angeles Times, June 11th, 1972. Public domain literature here. This is accessible to everybody. The title is very interesting. LA to New York in half an hour. 10,000 mile per hour tunnel train plan developed. This is back in 1972. Now you can see the cutaway here. Let me blow this up for you here. You've got the vacuum tube, you've got the tube support structure, you've got the vacuum pumps, emergency bumpers, lateral coils, suspension gap. In this article and cutaway drawing, they're giving specific details about public domain sources that are talking about this. So if we're hearing about it within the public domain, it's already a done deal. They've already done it. They've worked this out. Let me take you to my advanced illustration here that shows you military personnel on one of these high-speed maglev train systems here. And these have got to be crisscrossing the continental United States. I would say dozens of them. It sounds hard to believe, but when you throw in billions of unaccounted classified black budget funds into these programs, you're definitely going to get what you pay for here. What is the reason for all of these underground bases? We want to talk about the logic and what's going on here. Is it strictly for the continuity of government, the protection of 450 senators and congressmen from Washington, D.C., or is there something much bigger going on here? So really, is it the succession of political leaders involved in the continuity of government? Is that what these are for? It doesn't seem like it because of the vast depth that these are, the cost, the logistics involved. Something else is going on here. And I want to talk about the potential uses for the underground bases. These are kind of laid out by Richard here. I'm going to break these out real quickly. Potential nuclear war, that might be a reason for the underground base. Change in physics of rotation of the Earth, pole shift or axis relocation. Reversal of the Earth's magnetic field. Entering a galactic dust cloud. Asteroid/comet strike. Massive sudden climate change. Social, political, and economic chaos. Take a very good look at this photograph. I'm sure we're all familiar with it. But I want to ask the question, what's going on beneath Washington, D.C.? See, you've got the Capitol building, you've got the Washington Monument, but is there something lurking below the surface here? Which brings us to this book, Hogs in the Tunnel by John Elvin, which I think is a little bit on the obscure side, but hang on. This guy has done some good digging. He's pulled up some good information here. I want to review this. Author John Elvin reveals that there is a vast network of tunnels below Washington, D.C. Pay attention to the wording here. I love it. According to Elvin, his research and insider sources reveal that beneath Washington, D.C. lies a serpentine network of secret underground passageways that looks like miles and miles of huge intestines wrapped back and forth bigger tubes and smaller corridors, as if the Earth had its own innards. I love the wording here. Other tunnels run from the State Department to the White House and stretch the length of Pennsylvania Avenue. Some of these tunnels are large enough to accommodate vehicular traffic. So if you put what this guy is saying here, and I love the wording, and we put this to a graphic, it might look something like this. You can see this intestinal innards that this guy's talking about. That's what I try to portray here. And it could be to this extreme. I mean, if we go by what he's saying, it would look something like this. What are they doing below here? Using taxpayer money, what are they doing here? Underground Washington. This is News and Record, November 16th, 1930. The nation's capital's mysterious maze of subterranean passages, some of them haunted with historic, sinister recollections. So here you've got the Capitol building, and then you've got these subterranean tunnels. Here's my colorized version that gives you an idea. So they were pre-existing in 1909 timeframe. So this is going back quite some time. They already had these here. And then I want to take you to a couple of newspaper clippings that's going to be wordy, but very important to our subject matter here. News and Record, November 16th, 1930. Here it says, New York's elaborate system of tunnels is famed throughout the world. Almost everyone knows that there are at least 6 sub-levels beneath Times Square, but few persons suspect that the broad paved streets of the national capital cover a maze of subterranean passages. This is exactly what the author is talking about and referring to here. It goes on. These tunnels link probably a score of federal buildings and were designed, it is said, for convenience and economy. Although it is disclaimed that they are secret, they are always under the watchful eyes of guards, and it is not denied that they sometimes serve to cast a veil of secrecy over the transportation of valuable materials and documents. In case of invasion, they could serve a useful purpose by enabling officials to pass secretly from one building to another. So this is establishing that these underground tunnels do exist way back in the 30s here. Okay, completion of the Senate Railway, as it was called originally in 1909, was the signal for gleeful newspaper comments. Vice President Sherman was the first person to make the trip, and after officially opening the road, commented upon the scenery en route and encouraged the scribes to give themselves a treat. At first, the route was trackless, the vehicles operating by stored electricity. So now they're talking about electrical vehicles being involved. It's getting a little bit more sophisticated. Moving on, the walking tunnel for representatives was open at about the same time as the Senate subway, but with less fanfare. Deluxe transportation of the sort furnished of the senators, 96 in number, could hardly be provided for the 435 or more members of the House. In addition, it is pointed out the representatives are younger and sprier. They have to walk, but the brightly lighted passageways is a boon in bad weather and enables them to elude tourists and motor cars. So again, a little bit more supporting information here. Both tunnels measure 22 feet in width, 11 in height, and are 700 feet long. They are of reinforced concrete construction with white walls and ceilings and gray floors. The depth of the cut in 18 feet below the surface, and the tunnel begins at the capital end in the vast subterranean caves that extend the length and breadth of the building. What secrets did Dick Cheney take with him to his grave? I want to know the answer to that question. Was he the last of the gatekeepers? I mean, what did this gentleman really know? He was very secretive. I'm going to take you to his house here. What was going on beneath Dick Cheney's house near the U.S. Naval Observatory? So you can see you've got this peaceful house here. But then we come to this newspaper clipping, the Tribune, December 9th, 2002. Blasting classified at Cheney's house. Neighbors of Vice President Dick Cheney are being shaken and rattled at least once a day by mysterious blasts at the U.S. Naval Observatory where Cheney lives. The Navy says the explosions are part of a construction project that has been going on for several months, but won't say more because the project is classified. Isn't that interesting? Here's a quote from David W. Gillard. Due to its sensitive nature in support of national security and homeland defense, project specification is classified and cannot be released. In addition, please understand that we are severely constrained by operation requirements to perform this project on a highly accelerated schedule. So what's so classified going on at Dick Cheney's house? What's going on here? They're in a rush. They're blasting away. They don't care who they wake up. What's going on here? I'd love to know what's actually going on. Why did Dick Cheney receive the Golden Eagle Award from the Society of American Military Engineers in 1997? He is a politician, not a construction engineer. Was this award for his contributions to the construction of multiple underground facilities? It's a very good question. You know, like here you have Dick Cheney. He's vice president. He's not an engineer per se, and yet here we have him getting an award from the American Society of Military Engineers. What's going on here? I wanted to do some checking and verify this, so I went on their website And it says here, prominent leaders honored for contributions to national security. And on the bottom here, I've got the arrow, 1997, the Honorable Richard B. Cheney. So it's confirmed. It's legitimate. I want to bring your attention to Catherine Austin Fitts and give you just a little bit about her background. This is from Palm Beach Daily News, November 30th, 2025. Here it says, Catherine Austin Fitts is a distinguished financial executive, former public servant, and founder of the Solari Report, a private intelligence platform offering strategic analysis on markets, geopolitics, technology, and long-range economic trends. With a career that spans Wall Street, Washington, and independent economic analysis, Catherine has long been a thought leader on the forces reshaping the global economic and political landscape. Here are some key aspects of Fitts' black budget claims. Number one, 21 trillion missing. Fitts frequently highlights reports indicating that between 1998 and 2015, the Department of Defense and HUD had 21 trillion in unsupported, undocumented adjustments or missing money. Number two, underground bunkers. She has recently stated that a significant portion of this money is used to build extensive, hidden, underground facilities for elites. Breakaway civilization. Fitts argues this funding goes toward a secret parallel economy, a black economy, that operates outside public oversight, building advanced technology and infrastructure for a specialized group. Got another quote from Richard Sauter that I wanted to bring to your attention here. And here he says, we now know that vast sums of money have been drained out of the public treasury for many years. The amount of money that is unaccounted for across the many federal agencies runs into the trillions of dollars. So, the funding for a major clandestine civil engineering project is plentiful and available. That brings us to the story of David Adair, who claims that in 1971, he traveled to Area 51 to investigate the propulsion system of an extraterrestrial engine deep inside an underground facility. Now, I've covered this story before, and I'm very skeptical about his claims for a number of reasons. But since this whole presentation is all about deep underground facilities, I figured we can't talk about it without highlighting David's claims here. So essentially, what I've got here is David's magnetic plasma fusion containment rocket is prepared for launch at White Sands Missile Range on June 20th, 1971. So you've got a C-141 Starlifter, you've got his rocket all set up, and this is here at White Sands Missile Range. And I'm questioning the navigation system that he used in this rocket. And that's what I want to highlight here. David's rocket was launched from White Sands Missile Range in New Mexico and landed at Area 51 in Nevada. What navigation did he use? Did he calculate the wind drift component? So you can see on my graphic here, it's 550 miles. How could he navigate that rocket to land at Area 51, 560 miles away, with the kind of precision to put it down right on the dry lake bed? That's a serious concern here. Now, David flew with General Curtis LeMay to Area 51 in a black painted DC-9. Now, this is his claim. This is his claim. Now, next to the DC-9, you can see this very strange people mover that he calls it. It looks like the tram at Disney World crossbred with an F-86 Saberjet with that air intake in the front. That's what he described, which he rode on. And then from that point, the people mover moved over inside a large hangar at Area 51, and there were stanchions along kind of the outside walls here, and you've got the people mover right in the center. And then the next thing that David said, I think, is very significant. If this is true, this is according to his claim, he stated that the entire floor dropped down. This whole thing was an absolutely massive platform. We're talking about thousands of tons of weight here. And he said the way this worked is there were these large diameter worm screws that you can see in my illustration that were the size of sequoia trees, he mentioned. So the whole floor is dropping down. So once the platform was lowered down on these large diameter worm screws, David said that there was a very long tunnel that converged at the very end, but you couldn't see the ending of it. It was extremely large, extremely long, and he was going down the people mover in this tunnel. Now, as he was moving down this tunnel, he said that there were hangars on the side, and he was able to look inside one of these hangars, and what he said he saw is the basis of where I'm questioning. In this graphic, this is the point of contention that I have with David Adair. So he claims that in 1971, he saw the XB-70 inside this large hangar, this underground hangar. And I know for a fact, because I covered this on one of my previous videos, the last XB-70 that existed was flown to the Air Force Museum in Dayton, Ohio back in 1969. So that was 2 years before he claims to have seen it here at Area 51. Now, also within this hangar were 3 different sizes of teardrop-shaped UFOs that all had these landing gear legs. Now, they said that they had cockpit windows, all of them had canards, and they measured approximately 50, 75, and upwards of 250 feet in length. Now, this is according to David Adair. Now, once they passed this hangar, they got back through this tunnel on the people mover, and then the people mover stopped. One man got off, and you can see that in my graphic here, and he went up to a device that had a retinal scanner and a handprint reader. Once that process was complete, an iris opened up. And once David got through this iris, this is the most significant part of his story here. He said that he was led into a large room that contained something absolutely miraculous, which I want to show you here. And this is what he claims he saw. He claims that he saw an ET engine that was mounted on a large pedestal. This was about 60 feet across. And it was, let me try to explain what this thing actually looks like. Essentially what he said is that it looked like 2 octopi making love with tentacles all intertwined, and then you had the rotting bone carcasses of a whale on a beach. Now, beneath those bones of the decomposing whale carcass, you had interconnecting fibers and interconnecting what looked like veins with a liquid mercury red substance pumping through them. That's all being suspended on what looked like a gray dolphin skin. Now, on the bottom of this thing, he said that it looked like tomato vines intertwined into plugs and ports that fully integrated into the bottom of the platform here. And his job was to investigate what may have gone wrong with this propulsion system. And there was a symbiotic cortex connection between his brainwave frequency thoughts and the engine himself. And when he found out that they were trying to retrofit the technology for a quote-unquote first strike weapon, that's where the big argument took place between David Adair and those that were heading up the program. In a nutshell, that's the case, but I just wanted to redo this case with new AI tools to make this case come alive and really preserve our history here. I want to thank you for being with me today. And you know what? I can't do these videos without your encouraging and inspirational comments in the comment section. I'm happy to read those. It's very inspiring. But in this presentation, what I really wanted to do is give everyone an idea of just what's going on here. This isn't talked about very much because it's a secret world. We don't even see this. It is literally out of sight, out of mind. We don't even think about this because it's completely non-visible to us. We don't see it. So I wanted to shed some light on this. We talked about the funding that was going on. We talked about the infrastructure, the logistics of building this. We talked about Dick Cheney. We talked about what might actually be going on within these underground facilities. And I kind of want to leave you with the concept of being mad, angry, a vendetta against the government for stealing money away from the infrastructure that we really do need, like schools and bridges and other things that the money could be poured to. Who knows just exactly what they're doing in these underground facilities. And I want to absolutely highlight the work of Richard Sauter. I don't think he got enough credit. I think he definitely deserves more credit for the tremendous work that he's done. So thanks again for being with me, and I'm happy to see you on the next video.